Hi, and here we are, part 2 of Curious Turtle's mini-series of achieving the film look. In this exercise, what we're going to be looking at is the importance that colour makes to our particular look. And of course, this is one of the big ones. Now, when we're taking a look at our colour scheme, probably one of the first things we want to think about is whether we're going to have a high saturated look or a more desaturated look. And we can use colour to clue in the audience about what they're going to be expecting out of the scene. So something that's gritty and urban is usually a bit more desaturated. And something that's friendlier is probably more high saturated. So we can clue people in to whether something is a sort of friendly place or a more hostile place through the use of colour. Now in this first shot, we've got quite a serious little case here, and what I want to do is to try and desaturate this out a bit. Now as before, let's add an adjustment layer. The keyboard shortcut for that, because I'm going to be using it so often, is Control-Alt-Y if you're on Windows, or Command-Option-Y if you are on Mac. And that just adds a little adjustment layer for us, and I'll call this one Desat. Now when we're desaturating something, often the first thing that you're going to be reaching for is, under colour correction, is the hue and saturation controls here. And if we take down our mask saturation to minus 100%, we've now got a desaturated image. It's black and white, boom, job done. But, not quite. There are better ways of desaturating images up. And let's just take a snapshot of this one and I'll show you. And reset this here, and I'll show you how. Now, one of the things that the hue saturation does is it weights the different color channels and takes the colors out of those individually. We could pick, if we find like a nice contrast channel, I'm using Alt and 1, 2, and 3 to switch between the different channels here. We can try and find a nice contrast channel and use that as our main channel, or we can use this little effect. If we come to our colour correction, go to tint and leave it as it is there, that is now setting my black to black, my whites to white. So we're getting a very different look than we were with our hue saturation. Let's just prove it to you. Let's look at our snapshot from before. So this is our hue saturation with the desaturation down, and this is using the tint. So take a look at this white line here and on the fire engine over there. So this is with hue saturation, and this is with tint. So you can see we've got a much nicer contrast going on with our tint there. And what I can also do, here's another little trick. If I turn my hue saturation back on again, mask saturation set back and it's all reset. But if I just turn my hue around, I can sometimes pick out an area where it's going to start to look even better and start to pop out even more. So by moving my master hue up to 24, pop this out just a little bit more. And the cool thing is, we hit T to come to opacity. I can mix this back a little bit here, and we've got a really nice customized desaturated look, which is much different than we could have done just by pulling down the saturation here. But what about the opposite? What if we wanted to add more saturation? Let's actually come over here to this shot. We're going to be looking at this shot a bit later. Actually, well, it's probably a good one to check out the saturation. So Control-Alt-Y or Command-Option-Y to add a new adjustment layer. And we'll come over, we'll take a look at what we can do to add saturation. Let's come back to our trusty hue saturation here. I'll bring my master saturation up about 25. Take a snapshot of that. Call this one high saturation actually while we're here. I'll do a before and after. It's pretty good. Added a nice bit of saturation there. What I've also got, if I come back into my colour correction, is we've got vibrance. So we can add vibrance up. If I add a whole ton of vibrance up there, and we'll just compare and contrast with our saturation here, you can see it's picking out different parts of the, let's take that to 25 as we had before. it's picking up different parts and saturating those up in a slightly different way as well. So we can take that up a lot higher, take the vibrance up a lot higher without having any distortion. To reset that, I try to do the same thing with my saturation, take that up so high, we start to get some sort of strange little color artifact popping in a lot sooner. So vibrance, let's show vibrance at 100 versus saturation at 100. Vibrance, saturation. Vibrance, saturation. Cool, but there's another way of doing this, actually, that gives another different look that you wouldn't expect with just the hue saturation here. And it's a little bit more complex, but sometimes it can be worth the effort. So if I come to my channel and go to Channel Combiner, this is going to give us a really odd little image here at the default settings. So what's happening is my RGB values are being translated to hue, lightness, saturation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move into YUV color space. So we're going to set our first one to RGB to YUV. I'm going to duplicate my channel combiner, set this to YUV to RGB. So now it's not doing anything. It's just taking our image, turning it to a YUV, and then turning it YUV back to RGB. But here's where the fun stuff happens. In between these two, if I add a little levels command, boom, and I've got my RGB levels here, I can start changing these up. But remember now, my RGB controls aren't actually RGB anymore, they're YUV. So if I come into my input black, set this to 50, set this to 205 on the input white. So we're moving these an equal number or an equal distance close to each other. We'll do the same on the blue, see what happens. So 50 and 205. So they're equally in. What this has now done is also increase my saturation in a different way than just adding hue saturation or adding the vibrance. And let's take a look at that. So this is vibrance set to 100. And this is my little channel combiner. So we can see that pop coming in really nicely there. And this is a cool way of adding a whole load of saturation. So here's the original, the before, and with a saturation pop. And we can use this. Let's take a look at this here. We can use this to really add a load of color, and in some places, you know, make this almost surreal, kind of painterly sort of color scheme going on, which I think is kind of cool. But of course, the film look isn't just all about the saturation. If we go back to our little first shot here, and we'll come back to our desat, you know, another big thing is about the color scheme that we're going to use. So we've got our saturation sorted out. Let's add a bit of color to this. And we could use any of a number of color correction filters we actually have here. And all of these are great at doing particular jobs. But here's a nice little quick trick to do. If I add a new solid, and I'll make this just a green, I'll set my brightness to 50 and saturation all the way up to 100%. Hit OK on that. We've got a lovely green over the top of everything. Let's change this blend mode now to color. Hit T to bring up the opacity. And let's mix this back to take it all the way down to 0. And maybe mix this up to about 9%. And what this now does is it gives me a tint or a hint of that color without overpowering the rest of the image. If I come up to layer and go to solid settings here, let's bring this over to the side. I don't want this to be green in this particular case anymore, so I can just come up here on my hue and just find a tint that is a bit more suitable for this particular job. And this here is probably a slightly more aged look, so we can just tint this a sort of orange brown here. We'll take a look at the before. Take a snapshot of that and the after. come over here. Before and after. Now, if you want to get a bit more in depth with the colour, and the colour is such a huge and important part, you know, that's one of the reasons why we've developed Film Wash, because Film Wash is there to shortcut a whole load of this process. So what we've got here is, if I come over into my film stock homage folders here, we've got a whole list of different film stock types. So we take a look at one of the Kodak stuff. Let's take a look at Kodak Gold. You can see this is doing quite a lot of stuff over here, and wherever we've got a little asterisk in here, these are the ones that we can start to play around with. So if we wanted to desaturate this a little bit, we can just come in and just pull the saturation down just with this one slider. And if we wanted to mix back the original here, so the effect's a bit too much, we can just mix that back using our mix back original slider here. Or if we want to make that even more, even stronger, we can do that by taking the mix back original back to towards 0. So that's with it completely off. And as we mix that down again, we get a nice kind of contrasty, saturated little look. Now we take the desaturation back down again. Cool, so this is our, what's that, Kodak Gold 200. Let's come up and we'll have another look. We'll do one of the Fuji color ones here. So maybe we'll look at maybe the Fuji FP 100C from the Volume 5. Cool thing about this is that, you know, these are designed not to affect the actual skin tone too much, but it gives a nice little look. 100C, and we can mix this back or stronger if we really want to. So off and on, and the cool thing is we can start to kind of combine these a little bit, add another adjustment layer. Say I wanted to warm this up a little bit, let's type in warm. Let's take a look at maybe warm faded. And this gives a really cool sort of vintage retro look to the to our little snow scene here. So before and after. Before and after, so we've got a nice sort of little look there. Let's pull this back, make that even stronger. You can even mix back another one if you want to. A lot of these actually, if you start to let's desat, find a desat thing. Yeah, if you start to put these in at slightly lower values, so you're kind of mixing back the original a bit higher, you've got a whole load of, you're kind of nudging your image in a certain way without making the whole thing too strong and overpowering. So before and after. Before and after. So colour and saturation has such a huge importance to the overall feel of your piece and giving it that film look. In the next exercise, in number 3, we're going to start to look at some of the lens effects. So we're going to be looking at a bit of misting. We're going to be looking at some vignettes. So join me over there.